good morning, everybody, and welcome to our latest episode of Diary of a CIO. I am really delighted to welcome our guest this morning, Phil Garner. Welcome, Phil.
Hi, nice to see you.
Yeah, nice to see you too. So Phil is a seasoned technology leader in the gaming space. With a wealth of experience in senior roles across major organisations. Currently the MD at Singular, who are a international software company specialising in iGaming. Phil has previously held leadership roles at Flutter International, including the role of Senior Director of Infrastructure and Platform Services, and has played a key role in shaping high-performance teams in the gaming and sports betting industry. Phil enjoys cooking in his spare time, attempting to keep fit and running, and has a partner and stepson back here in the UK, so spends a lot of time travelling for work and for personal reasons as well. So very quick intro to you, Phil. So we're going to delve in with some questions, and my first question is about your current role, because people are thinking, well, this is a podcast about CIOs and CTOs, and you are the MD of a technology company in the gaming sector. Bring to life for us what your role means in reality. Do you operate as a CTO and MD and more, I can imagine? Tell us about your current role.
Yeah, so Singular was acquired by Flutter around 3 or 4 years ago. And a lot of my role at the moment is trying to make sure we fully integrate it and turn it into a role so I'll just be a tech director in the future. But at the moment, I still am responsible for offices. We've got lawyers reporting to me, HR reporting to me, and it's trying to work out how we integrate that into the wider Flutter ecosystem is some of my role. But yes, I care as much about us getting stuff delivered in technology as I do about the health and safety in our Macedonia office. Everything comes across my desk.
Is that a new challenge for you, given that you've had technology leadership roles up to this point? How are you managing that?
I've enjoyed the variety. I think you get those opportunities to just come across different things you wouldn't normally do. And it reminds me really of some of the advice I got given when I was early in my career, being told, if you're getting more senior in tech to director level, you're just a director. You happen to be a specialist in tech, but you have to understand all the other parts of the business. So I think being in this MD role and getting us more integrated into Flutter is a really great opportunity just to learn new things and get new experiences.
Excellent. Good stuff. And you're managing to balance that focus on technology as well as kind of the wider part of your role.
Delivering software ultimately and running our platforms for our customers and players. So that's the majority of what the role's about.
So your tech career started around 2010 and you've progressed rapidly during the last sort of 15 years within global organizations. Was that senior leadership role always on your radar?
Not really. I always just enjoyed what I was doing. I enjoyed building teams, and I just wanted to get more involved in the decision making. As you got more senior, I just got more opportunities. I was really lucky in some of the things we did. I think the pace at which Flutter has grown in the last kind of 5 or 6 years has really given lots of people opportunities across the group to do many different things. And you just dive into the next challenge and do the best you can, ultimately.
Yeah. So you didn't have a burning desire when you were doing your degree to kind of become a leadership in technology? That was never kind of an aspiration for you. It's more happened.
It just kind of happened. My degree is in ocean science, so nothing to do with computing at all.
Yeah. Amazing. And so how did you start your career in technology then after doing a degree in ocean science?
I think it was before my degree, really. I used to spend a lot of time with my uncle over in the Netherlands, and he took me to data centers and got me doing bits and pieces when I was there in the holidays. A lot of the people around him kind of said, don't do a computing degree, do something else and we'll guarantee you a job if you ever want to come back into computing, but check you want to do something else first. So yeah. I went and did ocean science. University, really enjoyed it, spent lots of time playing in boats. Effectively, it's applied physics. And then following that, I spent a year in politics and realised I definitely did not want to work in politics. So I rang up and said, you said you'd give me a job. So yeah, they gave me a job and gave me a great opportunity that's turned into what it is today.
Amazing. What a great story. I didn't know that about you. And I guess getting to the position that you found yourself in, you must have had to take some risks along the way, or, reach a crossroad where you've got to make some decisions about which direction. Is there kind of one standout moment for you that completely changed the trajectory of your career?
I think it was probably when I went to work for Paul McCormack, who's now CTO of our UK&I division. He completely changed the way I thought about leadership. And you sometimes work for somebody and think, I've managed it now, I've learned everything I can from this person, but you could never keep up with Paul. Like, you'd always be being stretched. And that's really accelerated my career and given me great opportunities.
Do you have that mentor role with Phil now? Is he still kind of in your kind of, how plays that role in your career?
Paul definitely does. I was speaking to him last week, getting some advice on something. It's building that network of people you can call on and talk to is really important. Making sure there are people who you can find balance with, and working in an organization the size of Flutter, you're quite privileged in that you can reach out to people and have quite open and frank discussions about business stuff that you wouldn't able to do in a smaller organization.
Absolutely. And I can imagine there's other key people that have had an impact on your career over the last 15 years. And obviously the people that you talked about when you first started your career in technology. Are there other people outside of the Flutter organization that you would see as a mentor or someone that could provide you with some guidance?
My uncle is still somebody I chat to about IT now and again. His background's all in DevOps, and he taught me a lot of that I knew about in DevOps. So I'm always chatting to him about technology. And then otherwise, generally, I speak to people within Flutter. Just the size of the organization gives you that huge advantage.
And I guess the more senior you become in an organization, the more difficult it can be to receive, I guess, honest feedback as you kind of elevate yourself in your career. How do you ensure that you stay sort of self-aware as a technology leader in a business, particularly in this new role in Singular when you're taking on kind of much broader responsibilities?
I think you have to go and chat to people. It's very easy in the world of Zoom just to do the meetings you need to do with your peer groups and getting things done. But I spend a lot of time going to our offices and making sure I'm not just sitting down with the leaders in the office. I'm talking to other people and understanding what's actually happening. I think that's key to finding out what's going on. I mean, as a senior leader, you can't spend all your time like interviewing every single person. I'll never forget, we brought somebody in at one point to run our Sophia office. And the first thing they did is they wanted to meet every single person. And it was like, there's 600 people in this office. Like, that's going to take a while. So you've got to find balance. But I think understanding who are the key influencers in a group, don't ignore the job titles, who are the key influencers, and finding out what's truly going on the ground is the way to keep in touch with things. And otherwise, you have to use metrics. In a larger organization, you got to be measuring throughput, risk, what the team's doing. That'll give you an indication as to what's going on.
Amazing. And do you keep an eye on those metrics yourself?
Yep. Make sure we look at them on a monthly basis and looking at trends, and make sure we talk around them as a leadership team. And that isn't just things like what's going on in Jira. It's also, we use something called Peakon, which lets us measure kind of staff sentiment and what people are thinking. And then there's other metrics like security, like our revenue numbers, our customer numbers, what's going on with incidents. They're all things you need to make sure you're talking about constantly as a leadership team, looking at the trends, and those are the things you're trying to influence and change.
Sorry, do you use those metrics as a way for you to kind of gauge and self-reflect on your performance as a leader?
Yeah, ultimately, we set a set of key results that we want to make some changes over the next 12 months, and my job is to try and hit those metrics. And at the end of the year, if we've not hit them, we've got to think about why haven't we hit them? What could we have done differently? And I think you have to constantly reflect on how could you have done something better? Like, you've never done anything perfect, or at least I've never done anything perfect. There's always something better you could have done. And reviewing kind of how the team went about something, how you went about a certain meeting or certain conversation, thinking about what you could have done differently, I think is really important.
And obviously, you've talked about some of the benefits of working for, a large global organization like Flutter. It would be great to delve into a little bit more about some of the benefits that you've seen from being able to move from Flutter, FanDuel to a much smaller, fast-moving, I guess, new market entry that all under the same group. What have you benefited from that experience?
I think it enables you to go from operating a large scale business where you maybe have 1,000 techies to a small organization where you've only got 25 or 50 techies. But at the same time, you're always trying to do the right thing by the customer, give them a great entertaining experience. But the way you approach those problems when you've got different budgets, different availability of resource is quite different and challenging. And you don't often get that. You either have to move organizations and work somewhere else. But within the Flutter umbrella, you can do all of that in the same organization and still get advice and help from different people. And sometimes like sitting in a room of let's say DevOps was a great example. We used to still run, I think, a regular session where you get the DevOps teams from each business in Flutter International to sit together and chat about what they're doing. And you'd find that everybody is approaching the same problems, but the way a team that's 1,000 people approaches a problem and has big budgets and a team that has got very little budgets and there's a few people, it's really interesting to see just the different way they've solved the problem. They're all the same problems, but in completely different styles and ways. It's just really exciting.
And how have you adapted to that then? Because it's a big change, right? Coming from the size and scale of Flutter to kind of the team and the challenges that you talked about at Singular. Was it a kind of a steep learning curve for you, or have you just kind of taken it in your stride?
I think I've taken it in my stride. Probably have to chat to some of the team and ask them what they think. Definitely lessons to be learned, I think, from when we originally bought Singular. I think some teams came into Singular and kind of rolled out the PokerStars style kind of delivery process and other bits. And then when I came in a year ago, I had to explain like, okay, that is a fantastic process for an organization of 1,000 people, but this is an organization of 200 people. We need to remove some of that bureaucracy because our job is to deliver software, not to write PowerPoint presentations. Yeah. And it's finding that right balance. And I think that's a constant battle you have in any organization of 40, the human Dunbar number, where people don't all know each other, can't easily interact. How you scale beyond that number and make sure you just don't add lots of bureaucracy and slow the business down, but still have the right level of governance, I think there isn't a magic wand. I think it's just a battle of trying to find the right balance.
It's it's interesting that you've had that experience in your career. I can imagine you probably didn't anticipate being able to do that whilst maintaining, I guess, the benefit of still working for the Flutter group. I guess as your CV and the value that's given to your CV is huge, because you've been able to get that experience without taking the risk, I guess, of going to a scale-up business. Thinking about then when you are working for such a large organization and you've got so many different brands and business models all under one roof, and teams with different ways of working, how do you foster that collaboration and knowledge sharing in an organization at that scale across the different teams?
We try together various teams on a sometimes an annual or biannual basis, and get them to collaborate and get people to build their own networks. At the same time, it is also about, we have a team called the Horizon Scanning team, and they do a great job of not just providing leaders across the business with what's going on in the wider market from a tech sense and tech point of view, how different business trends might impact our business, but they're also great at letting us know this team over here has been doing X or Y, and you can very easily then reach out and speak to them and find out what's going on. Creating those networks, I think, is key to enabling that kind of, we call it Flutter Edge in Flutter. But that kind of really gives us an advantage, and it makes it a really enjoyable place to work. It's things you get involved in, stuff that you don't normally expect you get involved in.
You've talked about the importance of creating those networks and relationships quite a lot throughout our conversation. Do you think that's something that has come from you as an individual that's gone and kind of seeked that from the organisation that you work in? Or do you think that's something that's just encouraged within Flutter?
I think it's encouraged in Flutter. I'd say by default, I'm probably an introvert, so not the kind of person that's going to, by default, go and create a massive network and meet lots of people. I'm definitely not an extrovert. So I think it's something that is part of the Flutter culture, Flutter DNA is encouraged by our leaders for us to do. And it does unlock huge value.
Just thinking about your characteristics, you're naturally an introvert. What steps have you had to take on a personal level to kind of push yourself out of the comfort zone, your comfort zone, so you've been able to kind of operate at that leadership level?
I think self-awareness is really important, and constantly reviewing what you can do better, seeking out people's, going and asking a colleague, how do you think I did in that meeting? What could I have done differently? Trying to learn what you can improve is the only way to try and make yourself better as a leader. At the same time, Flutter's offered mentoring and coaching for its leadership level people. And that really helps you then talk through, okay, I've started a new role. I am struggling to build a relationship with X person. These are the reasons why. And having someone you can talk all that through with and get a different perspective is really valuable. At the same time, through Flutter, I had the opportunity to do the Institute of Leadership and Management courses from level 3 all the way up to level 7 through Leeds Beckett University. And that taught me a huge amount. It's kind of like applied MBA might be a best description of the level 7, but
the sound went up a little bit then.
So the ILM level 7 is almost like an applied MBA.
Okay.
And you get the opportunity to learn the theory from an academic point of view, but then you're applying it in your day job and then writing about how you applied it, thinking about what you can have done differently, and doing that through Leeds Beckett University, I found hugely valuable in kind of accelerating my ability to be a better leader. Even
the most accomplished leaders experience self-doubt, maybe imposter syndrome at times. Do you ever feel like that? And if so, how do you overcome it? And how do you kind of manage those periods where you feel a bit uncertain about what you're doing?
Yes, definitely. At times, I think you first need to think about, why do you feel like that? What's making you feel insecure? And then speaking to a mentor or a colleague to try and get some help is really helpful, I think. But then I think the other thing you can do is understanding, why did you feel like that in the first place, and how do you prevent feeling like that again in the future? And you've got to think about all the things that you have done as a leader, all the things you have achieved, and think, no matter what, like, if you've done all those things in the past, surely you can do this next thing.
You have to do quite a lot of self-reflection. How do you find time when you've got a busy life professionally and personally, and also with the parameters of how you work, Phil? You've got to travel internationally a lot as well. How do you find time for that self-reflection?
Two things. I use a method to manage my tasks called getting things done. And once a week, I sit down, clear down all my inboxes, emails, everything else. But as part of it, at the end, I think about what's gone well this week, what needs to change, what can I do differently, and just putting that time aside on a regular basis to spend that time reflecting and thinking about how you can improve things. I think is really valuable. I just say, block out the time. It's the only way.
So you kind of work that into your workload almost. That's kind of on a weekly basis. You kind of book that time into your schedule to make sure you're committed to doing it. That's really good advice, actually, because so many people don't do that and then neglect that time. And I guess it's really interesting what you just said about actually, well, it helps you move on to your next set of tasks by actually having that self-reflection. Coming on to sort of what's ahead and sort of challenges that you're facing or you might face in your current role. What do you think is the biggest challenge on your plate for 2025?
I think the biggest challenge is we're going to be migrating an operator onto the singular platform. So we've got to migrate customers from 4 countries onto the new platform, which will be a big challenge for the teams. And then the other thing we're doing is we have changed the structure of Flutter into regions. And as part of that, we're going to try and make teams work more together. So rather than teams thinking about, I'm a Java, I'm singular, I'm MaxBet, they need to think, we're Flutter together. Our job is to achieve X for Flutter. And just getting that shift in mindset and getting teams collaborating and working effectively together. I think it's going to be a big part of what I end up doing.
So there's some real balance of technology innovation and that kind of organizational change piece that you need to manage. How do you bring your teams on that journey? You said it's a mindset change. How do you bring people along with you to get there when they must be used to working, particularly in a singular, where I can imagine the teams are, they're used to working in that smaller scale up environment, fast paced, getting things done. How do you do that?
I think there's several ways. One is setting out a clear kind of vision, mission, objectives. This is all what we've collectively got to do, and being very clear that that's what we're doing and the priorities of it. But then I think it is looking at academic paper called the Cultural Web, and it looks at the different stories, symbolism, control mechanisms that existed in an organization to change the culture. And you need to look at those things and think about how are we applying that to change the culture we have. So it is everything from simple things from give everybody a Flutter t-shirt so they're not wearing their own branded t-shirt, things like that. The constant reminders to teams about what language they've used and trying to make sure the leaders are demonstrating the right language and the right behaviors all help you influence and change that underlying culture. So it is constantly looking at those things and trying to work out how you change things. And your role as a leader is to make it so that culture persists in the room when you've left. You only have 50 hours a week at most, let's say, to get in front of people and talk to them. So the other hours when you're not there or you're not in that meeting, how are people behaving? What are they doing? And that's what you as a leader have got to try and influence and change. I'm
assuming you need really good structure, and your leadership team need to share the same, approach and kind of values that you talked about there. How do you make sure you've got the right team to do that then?
Make sure you've got a diverse team. Make sure you don't all think in the same way. Then it's about getting that team to work together. There's 5 dysfunctions of a team. It's something often referenced as a book, but fundamentally what it's talking about is that team needs to have disagreements. It needs to be able to argue, to be able to find the best solution. But at the end of it, everybody trusts each other and you commit, disagree and crack on. And getting your team that was willing to have those disagreements and discussions, is willing to look at things from different angles, but then say, no, we're doing this. That's what you're going after. And I think your constant job as a leader is to look at how have you built your team? How can you make it better? How can you improve it? And making sure you don't fall into the trap of just hiring people that think like you. I think you need to make sure you bring in different skills, different experiences, different ways of approaching things.
We know that diverse teams in technology, it's a challenge, right? We know that, and that is an industry challenge that we experience. Are there any practical steps that you've taken when hiring into your team to try and get more diversity across the people that you're hiring, so you haven't got people that are all thinking and operating in the same way?
We definitely think about how do people think. It isn't so, are they action orientated? Are they collaborative? Are they visionary? When we're looking at a vacancy in the team, we're thinking about what does the team currently have and what is it we want to go after. And all my team last year did a psychometric test to see where we were, and we all shared the results so we could understand how each other thought. But it's looking at those results and understanding, okay, if I'm recruiting again for that team, what's the type of person I would need that will fit, that will give us a different approach. I think otherwise across Flutter to change overall diversity, we've got a number of programs going on, including Project Rise, we call it. So we've got a lot of leaders from across the business, mentoring female staff coming into leadership roles and trying to make sure they get extra support as they move up through the organisation.
And I guess it's balancing that when hiring is a challenge anyway, right? For good quality techies, as you kind of labelled them, and also retaining talent is also key. What's been your approach over the last few years when we've seen real kind of fluctuations in supply and demand for technology professionals. But what's been your approach to building a high performance team in a competitive market?
Don't lower your standards. You need to hire good people, is the first thing, even when it's challenging. And then the second thing is it isn't about what I call extrinsic motivation, how much somebody's paid or the different things they have. It is about the intrinsic motivation, like we're doing something interesting, challenging, you're working with great people. Like these are the things that keep people or can even attract people to want to come and work for you. So I think focusing on that culture you've built and making it so people want to be part of your team, want to stay, they don't want to leave, they enjoy being there. That's really important because I think the great thing about, for me, the things I enjoy doing are, do I have a challenging thing to do? Am I working for somebody who's going to grow me and develop me? Am I enjoying working with the people I'm working with? And if those three things aren't true, then I get pretty fed up. So I think it's important, like if you create a culture where you've got those things, that's really valuable.
Good kind of three measures to have for any individual. How do you make sure your team are feeling the same way and that those three boxes are being ticked for people in your teams?
I think it's about talking to them, chatting to them. And if you've created that team where you can have open and honest conversations, then they'll tell you when they're fed up or when it's not working. And that's the environment you've got to foster.
Obviously, coming on to talk a little bit about technology and business strategy. Obviously, we wouldn't do a podcast without touching on AI. But as we see AI reshaping industries, what do you see as the biggest opportunity with AI and also the biggest threat specifically for the gaming sector today? I
think the biggest opportunity is going to be around how we improve productivity in terms of enabling developers to do more quickly, get things checked, more access to information at speed. I think it's going to be really valuable. I think the biggest threat, though, is over trusting the output you get. I think we're going to spend quite a bit of time trying to understand how we interact and change how we behave with it. I've read some articles around how people overtrust what they're told, but then when they see it's wrong, they get really angry with it. As we develop it and you get developers using it, how do we ensure that the output you've been given is actually useful, like the code that you've written is completely thread safe or something else, is going to take time. And I think that by default, we overly trust AI, and that's probably something that needs to change.
What about specifically for the gaming sector? Is there anything kind of new and exciting that AI is really going to kind of reshape and impact that you can share?
I think it's going to change how users interact with our platforms. So suddenly understanding that somebody wants to place a bet by chatting to a chatbot, like, are they going to want to do that? How are they going to want to do that? Will we still have a front-end sportsbook that lots of customers use all the time, or will people in future just interact with sports through chatting to a chatbot? It's going to be quite interesting, I think, to see what happens and how the user behavior changes. And
how big do you think the impact of AI is going to be? Do you, in terms of, previous things that have happened in technology, how big do you think it's going to be in comparison?
I think it's going to be significant, but when you think back to the last 40 years, we've gone from not having the internet to today. Like, the world has revolutionized. So I wouldn't say it's a bigger revolution than what's happened. We've already had massive revolutions in the way the whole world works. So I just think it's the next one. And it'll be interesting to see what comes after AI. What is the next big thing after that? Quantum computing maybe, but yeah, be exciting.
What do you think has been, I guess, your biggest challenge that you've had to face as a technology leader? And how did you come out stronger on the other side?
I think the biggest challenge I faced was definitely working out how to talk to non-techies as a leader and trying to influence them. And that took a lot of time and coaching and a lot of patience from my boss at helping me frame things in different ways. So we could actually, like, when you're talking to the chief commercial officer about Java updates, then how are you going to get him excited? Is ultimately a big question.
Yeah. And by the sounds of it, just from talking to you today, you've obviously invested in yourself personally with some of the, education and learning that you've done. Do you think that's been a bit of a motivator, one of the motivations behind doing it? Just the fact that you knew that was maybe one of your limitations?
Always. I think you always want to try and be better. And that's what you've constantly got to try and do.
And how do you take, as a leader, the theory that you learn when you're doing, the education, the courses that you're doing, and apply that in a practical sense?
You just have to try it. You've got to see what works, see what doesn't work, and understand that every situation is different. Just because in a previous role you did X and Y happened doesn't mean the same thing will happen again in the next role. So you just got to constantly be adapting and looking at it. What I found sometimes to be useful is to go, okay, I want to apply, or I've tried to apply something here. Like, let's sit down and think about why that hasn't worked. What could we have done differently? Is there any other related academic theory that might explain that and help me understand it? And then let's try applying that and seeing if that works. But ultimately, theory is theory. You go and do the experiments in the real world and see what happens.
Just talking about theory, obviously the best leaders never stop learning. We know that, and kind of it's an evolution. Is there any kind of single resource or book or source that you've read that's had a significant impact on your leadership style?
I think one of the key moments for me was I was sat down by my boss and was told, you're as technically competent as, like, there's no more technical expertise you can add. You are brilliant at what you do. But if you want to be a leader in an organization, then you need to stop reading DevOps Weekly. You need to start reading the Financial Times. And that was kind of the point that I realized and started to change what I did. I started reading the Financial Times. I started reading the Harvard Business Review. It was changing what I was doing, because your role is to be an expert in tech, but it is also to be a business leader. You've got to understand what's going on and look at things from a business point of view.
Do you think the technical side comes so naturally to you that you've had to work much harder on the kind of business leadership side? Is that fair to say?
It's definitely fair to say, yep.
But how do you keep on top of kind of trends and innovation in technology now when you've been putting so much self-investment into your leadership skills?
Having a great team around you, looking at who you've hired, making sure they're looking at interesting things. At the same time, I mentioned earlier, we have the horizon scanning stuff that goes on in the organization that gives us updates. And then I do make sure that amongst the leadership books, I'm reading the odd thing on other bits and pieces. I've been reading a book about AI recently and how to fix bugs in it and stuff. So still plenty of time to look at other things. And
is there one leadership book that you would recommend to anybody that might be in a similar situation to you that's naturally more technical than on the business side?
5 Dysfunctions of a Team would definitely be the book I'd look at. And that really taught me a lot about how to build effective teams and be better at operating in a team as well.
Our listeners will be lots of aspiring CIOs, CTOs, people looking to take leadership roles within technology organizations. If you could give one piece of career advice to an aspiring CTO, what would it be?
It would be stop spending all your time reading about tech, start reading about business. That would be the one piece of advice I was given, and the one piece of advice I'd give others as well.
Excellent. Good stuff. So before we wrap up today, Phil, we always ask our guests to leave a question for the next guest on the podcast. So I have a question for you from our previous guest, who is Peter Ennis, who's a CTO at Nexus. And he wants to ask you a question about cybersecurity. And just given the, I guess, fast pace of cybersecurity threats, how do you, as a leader, foster a culture of agility that allows your teams to identify risks quickly, adapt solutions, and maintain a resilient infrastructure?
I think what you need to do is build in a culture of managing risk, making it so everybody feels like they can be part of doing that, but doing it in an appropriate way where you're actually looking at what is the potential impact, what is the likelihood of something. So it's making sure everybody understands, how does the organization manage risk? How do you put something on the risk register but how are you accountable for making sure that that risk is reduced? It isn't just like, I put it on the risk register, my job's done now. It's okay, somebody needs to be accountable for each one of those things and actually improving where the organization is and what we're doing. So ultimately, it's about getting teams to be empowered and know that they are accountable for things.
Phil, it's been a pleasure talking to you this morning. Thank you very much for your time. And that wraps up our episode of Diary of a CIO.
Brilliant. Thank you very much.